sort of compound design, ADHD, science, bootstrapping.
So this is a world in profound crisis that ride this into a hyper-American millennium. So there's a demand that far outstrips all existing players.
I'm here with Danielle in your super cool energy source, energy storage lab, propane.
It's like, what lab? What do you do? It's energy, physics, and AI. That's what we do.
Energy, physics, AI. Danielle Fong is a Canadian scientist and entrepreneur who has been pushing the boundaries of energy technology for over a decade. She grew up in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and enrolled at Dalhousie University at the age of 12. Yes, 12. Graduating at 17 with a degree in physics and computer science with first-class honors. From there, she went to Princeton to pursue a PhD in plasma physics, but dropped out at 20 to go build things. In 2009, she co-founded Lightcell Energy in Berkeley, where she served as chief scientist. Lightcell developed a novel approach to compressed air energy storage, the idea being to make solar and wind power available on demand by storing energy cheaply at scale. The company raised over $37 million and was backed by Khosla, amongst others. Danielle has been recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30, MIT Technology Review's Innovators Under 35, and Times 30 Under 30. She's spoken at TED CERN, at the United Nations, and has been a mentor with the Teal Fellowship. More recently, she founded Lightcell Energy, where she's CEO. Lightcell is developing a new kind of energy conversion device, essentially turning fuel into electricity using heated salt that radiates light into specialty designed solar cells. Wow, incredible background. Can you explain to us what Lightcell is doing?
So the Chinese have known how to make fireworks for centuries, but no one has ever tapped into the basic physics for power. But when I started to explore it, I found that it was super linear in how intense it could get as you increase in temperature. So if only someone could figure out a way to get a flame as hot as possible without destroying everything, you would be able to produce an incredibly bright light source that's brighter than the sun ever gets on the Earth's surface, maybe 10 times brighter, that if you surrounded with solar cells, could make a power source that is like a portable Dyson sphere, like a sci-fi glowing power source that has dramatically higher energy density than a battery. So maybe 20 times the range on a robot or a drone or a vehicle, and quiet and lightweight. And potentially not just chemical power, but also producing power from novel fission or fusion processes as well. So basically, we've called it a portable Dyson sphere or a solid-state internal combustion engine. Everything from data centers to something that you can put into your backpack and power your Burning Man camp and power your Starlink, your laptop, charge your phone, brew you tea. The ability to build these light engines out of ceramic and sapphire and solar panels. And we 3D print these sort of corrugated lattices that are essentially a combination of heat exchanger and candle wick united in one that provides sodium chloride to the flame to make extremely bright light. And then that light you can match to solar panels. And it's more efficient than the conversion of light from the sun on Earth, maybe double or triple the efficiency of a typical solar cell.
And can you talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, what's going on within the energy landscape that makes this really kind of a global crisis in terms of like future energy needs?
Okay, well, today, we're mid-March, there's been a war with Iran, and as of very recently, Israel attacked Iranian infrastructure. Iran warned that they would retaliate on energy infrastructure after this. They have therefore attacked, and what they have attacked is basically the world's largest natural gas fields and oil fields, and they've restricted movement of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and so that's 20% of the world's oil, 30% of the world's natural gas, 50% of the world's helium, 1/3 of all of the urea, which is for fertilizer, during the time of planting. So this is a world in profound crisis, that the dawning realization of how restricted it's going to be has not unfurled itself before the people yet, because those price signals have been damped out even by the government. And so as the price, which has in for physical barrels, has topped $170, which is the highest ever for crude oil, $170 per barrel. It's going to continue to increase as long as the demand remains high, which it will be, and the supply is restricted and being attacked. Not just the current transportation, but also the infrastructure, which takes years to build, or decades, and is currently under threat. And so people are going to need to be more efficient, and people are going to need to have other sources. And there are so many, even just in terms of like turbine manufacture, time deliveries were stretched out like 7 years. But now that you have problems in the supply chain for fuels, you have a lot of things that can't be used efficiently. So you have to do something. So this is going to really kick off a critical period of innovation in energy, both invention and use of novel energy, because people are desperate from existing needs, and then also this exploding need for AI compute power concentrated in one spot, so that you don't have too much networking challenges. And so these things are all hitting at the same time. So this is the game field. This really sets what it will be for the entire rest of the century, probably, certainly the back half of this decade. And as a result, everybody who had been working on energy, even if it's been very thin in terms of what you can raise money to do in terms of frontier tech and timelines or whatever, now people are like, forget money. I have infinite money. I have GPUs burning a hole in my pocket, that every year that I have a GPU that I don't have plugged in, the depreciation on that GPU is worth an entire nuclear power plant.
Wow.
So that's the current state of desperation for everyone.
Now I'd love to hear how Lightcell, or generally the innovation you're working on, could fit into this power landscape and the future of energy and energy storage, and your vision.
Right. So, well, the key is that because we use heat, now it's high temperature heat, but because we can use heat, then we have the possibility of using a wide variety of different fuels. So that includes hydrogen that you can just create from solar or any renewable when it's available. That includes producing excess fuels, synthetic fuels from nuclear or solar or any abundant resource. And so that breaks the kind of chicken and egg problem of synthetic fuels, which is, what are you building for? And the way that we do this is we essentially make an extremely bright candle. And there's kind of two key pieces to that. One is, as you get it hotter, it gets nonlinearly brighter. Even faster than the temperature to the fourth power of black body emitters goes this.
I'm sorry, can you explain what black body emitters are?
Oh, sorry. It's a physics term meaning the sort of idealized, typical, although it's never perfect, emission of something that gets hot and starts glowing. If it were black at room temperature and you can't see it, it first gets red and then orange and then so on up to white. Won't get blue before being too hot to exist as a solid. But that's what a black body means. But this is something different. This is like a quantum resonance that takes place as the electron is actually oscillating around the atom. It's like a big, I like to think of it as like a big bell that like gets thermally wanged, that's the technical term, and it resonates like a very pure tone, and this particular color of yellow. And this is used to make extremely bright, almost monochromatic, and almost exponentially brighter as you increase in the temperature. And to achieve that really high temperature, we've pushed heat exchangers into materials and to temperature ranges that have never before been achieved.
Wow.
In an unclassified setting, which is to use almost like a three-dimensional arch, continuous curvature sort of lattice to shape the flow and transfer and have a lot of surface area to transfer heat, and also wick sodium chloride, which provides the sodium, which is that special bell, and then the chloride. The chlorine stays around, reforms with the sodium, and then condenses, and it processes it like a recondenser. Anyway, so you can think of it just as like a power spectrum of like, here's the amount of power that we want to deliver for the application, and which lines up pretty well. I mean, maybe not perfectly, but pretty well with our increasing confidence in working with increasingly large and energetic things. So that the smallest scale of a thing that you could want is something you can fit in your purse, and it can power your phone, power your laptop, power your Starlink, and it provides heat and light, and it provides power and hot water, right? And it's this general basic fundamental utility that everyone on the planet is going to want. Every person, much less every military, every person, right? So that's kind of the platonic ideal of the thing that we want to produce kind of a pretty broad range. It's like 30 watts, charge a phone fast, 150 watts, kind of what you would want for the Starlink and a laptop going straight. And like Joni Ive just sold his thing, like lamp thing, for thousands of dollars, and we could clearly beat that with a really functional piece of equipment that would be actually ideal. We could tell you what, you and I should collaborate. So that's on the small scale. You can imagine something like that powering any kind of robot or drone, and then as you scale up to about 1 kilowatt, that's sort of a heavy lift drone, up to about 1,500 watts, that's the maximum you're allowed to draw of a single appliance. Any electric appliance is 1,500 watts. That's a good generator size, that replaces backup generators. Up to 4 kilowatts, which turns out that's the largest size that you don't have to tell anybody about. Quote, anybody.
In terms of government regulation?
In terms of government regulation. So you can just go to the Home Depot and get it, right? So you want to make that, but quiet and not smelly and not vibrating and really sophisticated, so I can sell it at a nice margin. And that's a great scale. Then 25 kilowatts, that's what you want for like an electric flying boat. They ask for that scale. Long range extender, any kind of vehicle, so like a Chevy Volt, like if you reboot that, you replace the electric motor with this, and it's primarily an electric car, but it has range extension, you can go 1,000 miles.
And can you, where in the spectrum is so I think with the OpenClaw Mac Mini phenomenon, we saw how many people wanted their own.
The first scale would be able to just run off of propane whatever, or hydrogen, or and run your OpenClaw, unless you were using the very largest Mac Studio, in which case you might need to.
Okay, so your next OpenClaw setup is going to be potentially powered.
It should be.
Lightcell.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to plug it into. You can make it a little exoskeleton. You wouldn't need to actually have it plugged into the wall.
Whoa. Okay. What do you think about the line between selling to the U.S. government and selling to consumers moving ahead?
I think it's really important to remember that the United States government leads the future. Still. Has the most innovative set of swashbuckling entrepreneurs and scientists and inventors, and can still ride this into a hyper-American millennium. And that means supporting as powerfully the American dominion that it is leading as possible. That means not killing Claude, and that means funding people who, yes, it would imaginably have military applications, but it has profound civilian applications too. So people talk about drones. Obviously, drones can cause a lot of damage. Here in California, just the health impacts of the wildfires, if you study it, if you basically calculate it out, is between $50 and $100 billion a year in just health impacts.
Wow.
Because all the places where you can easily build are built, and then there's all of these like edge areas where there's flammable infrastructure and trees in wildfire areas in a warming world. And you can't drive trucks around. Enter my friends Fly Seneca, who make the world's greatest wildfire fighting drone. Carries 100 pounds of water, flies right up to it, squirts it. Instead of at a great distance, dropping things individually with 2 planes, they can fly a continuous set of these drones. If we increase their range by 20x, the surface area of what gets covered by the same base increases by 400x.
Wow, that's incredible.
So they have an enormous benefit that's just in California, 50 to 100 billion. That is, well, maybe equal to the amount of damage that Iran is doing with long-range drones that also use fuel.
But on the flip side, like it would stop the it could stop a future Palisades fire.
That's right. It could stop those, and it could, you could fly around and put out the fires that are currently raging in the Middle East. So that's one example. Another friends of mine, Zipline. They deliver 90% of all of the medicine in Kenya. I think. I might have gotten 1 or 2 of those details wrong, because the mountainous country that it is has underbuilt road network, lots of mountains, great distances. And so there's lots and lots of great distance, away from Nairobi, medicine or blood or something needs to be delivered. And so they built the world's first delivery network for really high value medical supplies. And now they've extended it to, they did with Walmart, Arkansas, and people were just getting ice cream just dropped from drones. And people were so, they would always order a tub of ice cream, and they were a little worried, feeling maybe a little bad, if they hurt this guy's health continuing to deliver ice cream. And he stopped at one point, and is he? No, he was just gone for a little bit. He came back and he's still doing it. But this delivery and a lot of things that are just last mile for completely civilian purposes can become totally automated. At the same time, air defense. So,
yeah. Okay,
so all the above have the following parameter, which is that the infrastructure is a property of how many bases that you put on, and the range is, maybe you can't do at the maximum distance the same number of flights, but the total number of things that are in range goes as the square of the range, which basically goes with energy density, because your weight that gets dominating all of the drones or most of these electric vehicles, the most expensive and the heaviest thing is the battery. And we would be able to replace that kind of weight with a fuel system that has all of the advantages of a lightweight battery system in terms of control of the motors and all that flexibility, but 20 times the distance. So again, 400 times the range. So that's just a profound change in the geometry of the global economy. It's clearly going to be part of the future. I was like, how the hell do I get onto this and take advantage of these 2 orders of magnitude that are available to me?
Can you double click on data centers and compute and AI?
Yeah.
Where on the timeline do you think we are for data centers pulling in a new energy source like this?
They're already, every major hyperscaler has schedules out multiple years where they are trying to at least qualify every new idea that they can think of.
Okay.
So that goes from the quite outlandish, but it might be real. They're actually producing neutrons. Helion. with Microsoft as an off-taker at 1 cent per kilowatt hour. So that's not really a commercial off-take, guys. So like this. But nevertheless, they're making neutrons with deuterium tritium in Washington, Bellevue, and all the way to, there's lots of geothermal. There's people who are trying all kinds of fuel cells. Every fuel cell company has basically come alive because no one was funding them because even though they're more efficient, they're more expensive. And so what you do is you get it financed, but there's a bunch of different middlemen and they all want to take their own piece. And so, it's a little more marginal. Suddenly it's just like they need the capacity. All the way to people, including myself, have gotten into the business of trying to find chunks of power in the tens of megawatts to the hundreds of megawatts to the multiple gigawatts of categories. They're like, for some reason, this isn't a data center yet. This is just out of equilibrium, right? It was formerly being, in a contract where they're selling their power at less than a cent per kilowatt hour. The data centers, they're actually buying, it's not just, if you calculate out what a typical rate would be, it's sort of order of magnitude 30 cents per kilowatt hour. But people are signing contracts for 75 cents per kilowatt hour because it's still a fraction of the depreciation of not running your GPUs. And the GPUs, if you look at it, it's okay, well, are the GPUs going to depreciate? Well, it turns out that the H100 is actually more in demand. And therefore, it's actually renting out at a higher price than it did when it first came out. Well, why is that? Semi-analysis pointed this out. Well, big one is that it's producing more valuable tokens. GPT 5.4 is a zillion times. Well, okay, it's not a zillion times. It's smaller, it's more efficient, and it's, I assume, more valuable. Maybe there's some inflation there. Producing more tokens, but also the researchers need it. So there's a lot of different generations of GPUs that are going to maintain value, and they're going to want to cook for as long as they exist and still have value. They're going to be a demand on the electrical grid at the same time as EVs, at the same time as oil is going to be in short supply. And when you have a supply of something that's deeply valuable and it's short supply at 20%, it doesn't mean prices go up 20%. It means things start pricing at closer to what they're valued by people in desperation, and other people who are in desperation who don't have the money don't get it.
So I understand these contracts are being signed now. How far away are we from having a data center potentially powered, in part, if not totally, by a propane-based energy source?
I mean, we are trying to do that here. So in addition to, we've been at the cutting edge of actually using AI for doing the things that's been increasingly powerful to do, from really powerful web and literature surveys to representing famous old data scientists and their perspective on things while I talk it out, a little better than a rubber duck, to now doing full agentic implementation. And now everybody at the company has been using these tools, is enhanced. We're also doing our own training runs all the time. And we're running our own furnaces. And so we are now maxed out for the amount of power that we can run here.
Wait, I want to double click. So on a high level, what are you all modeling here?
So we have a complex of tools and projects in something called a mind palace that has pulled in all of the papers and all of my tweets and all of the project and all the experiments
and Danielle has amazing posts. Obviously, this is going to come out on X, but you really are so tapped into AI and research and everything happening. So you have the Mind Palace.
So right, so what and why do I have all that on Twitter? It is because initially when I got the first iPad Pro and I had the pencil, I started using freeform imagery and Apple Notes to store everything that I could think of. And I pretty soon had thousands of notes. Pretty soon, by about 10,000, there's enough n-squared algorithms in there to just be crashing out. And I needed to put my thoughts somewhere. I had a Twitter. So I started putting, they're like, you're crazy. You're putting out too many thoughts. I'm like, that sounds like a you problem. They're like, what are you doing in my notes app? And so as a result, instead of just tweeting into the void about like things that I was joking about wanting to build, it actually was the perfect like corpus to pull in when the first time I had the opportunity to use the Agentic coding tools when they got really good this Christmas, to pull everything down. Hey, would it be useful? You know, AI is always asking me what I would think. Can't you just simulate me and then do something that I would think is good? Okay, sure. And then, holy fucking shit, AGI, okay? I had it talking iteratively and visually with Gemini, which has all of the, it's trained on all of the YouTube content and it has all of this. And so even though it wasn't able to make images, Claude Code was able to look at it. And even though Gemini wasn't very good in its own CLI, it was able to be driven by it. Even though the imagery, if you tried to make it in AI Studio, is really annoying, Claude Code could completely do it. And that was a full sort of psychological loop, like an artist would have. And so this just, I was fucking blown away, took off. And so now I'm like, okay, how do I make this so that it extends from being, like it'll work for my dev environment for this kind of weird workflow that I've found a way to hack around, to being like a product that anybody can use. I can just give and not worry too much about supporting it. So have a bunch of domain names, have a way to use the system itself, to document itself, and then register the domain name, put it all in Cloudflare, push a single command, and also like, and these are obviously not exactly the same system, it's sandboxed somewhat, but we have a whole, testing frameworks and rubrics to judge how well it's doing, which is also how we develop the much more tested and like statically analyzed code that moves valves around in our science and records everything and then puts it into the thing. And so this is basically coming together. So this is like a gonzo attempt to bootstrap right on top of the Singularity, Artificial Intelligence, AGI event horizon that's happening now, and lead the way with the most exciting physics work ever, and just build our own harness and then put it out. So we're sort of, and we're hugely advantaged. We know, in addition to all the experience that we have, just working with these things from the beginning really intensively. These guys are our friends. We're talking out in the open, and we're sharing our ideas. So a lot of people want to share, and the big labs don't find it as easy as we do to pull in communication all of the frontier models to hash it out. So all these models are out of date. Well, no problem. Grok is really good at knowing what is hot going on at X and figuring out how to recommend that and pull that in. Great situational awareness for all of them. Okay, Gemini is a genius scientist and artist, but is maybe a little too enthusiastic and schizo. No problem. Codex is gonna make sure to read the policy instructions before it's convinced about anything. That calms it down. And Claude Code is, the man of action, just wants to do it. So you put these together and you build your own ways to reflect on your own work, the rubrics that you repeatedly use, the doctrines that you use, and then you start optimizing out how often you need to be able to give it advice. And also, is it notifying you? Is the notification showing up on your Apple Watch? Is it showing up in the lighting system in the building? Is it going on to a task manager that everything is able to read, and are you able to read? Every time you improve these things, even though it's a lot of infrastructural work and it can have some trouble with sort of building multiple parallel paths and then getting confused or forgetting to not use certain things. Like it has trouble with that. But those dramatically enhance the scale of what's possible as a tiny company. And so we feel that we're part of a new generation of basically AI cavalry, or perhaps hordes, that essentially are super empowered, like almost like comic book heroes relative to what would normally be feasible.
And can you talk a little bit about, as a CEO and founder, in frontier science, how do you project timelines when you're running, obviously, these physical experiments, and it's not a wet lab, but you're dealing with materials that, like, is it harder to project timelines on getting towards product?
You know, it is, for sure. It's just a fact, right? And, you know, there's two ends of that you can optimize, right? The first is if you optimize the timeline, which is primarily how many iterations does it take for you to learn the critical lesson that the universe will eventually tell you. At best, it takes you no experiments. You already know the answer, you just weren't considering the data, which you already have. That can happen a lot. But sometimes it's just a certain number of iterations, right? And usually it's a certain number of iterations. And people get stuck behind the first iteration. They ask all kinds of advice, and they go to conferences, and blah, blah, blah. They wait years, and they raise money for 10 years or whatever it is. This is not the way to do it. If you don't have a great idea, do actions that give you information and move forward and try to answer the most critical thing. And this can just, it's qualitative, right? You can have AI help you understand from different perspectives what the really qualitative thing is. But what's going to flip the bit? First thing for me, okay, was I had to, I have to stop just reading papers about this and see if it's really true. Can I just, from salt and a high temperature flame, produce this incredibly bright light? And I convinced my parents, let me use their garden shed to do some experiments. I got a glassblower's torch based on snooping some YouTuber, Hacksmith on YouTube, and what he used. Shout out Waterloo area. And I put a steel spoon with salt in front of this flame, and my dad was there to get a picture, make sure nothing went too wrong. It was like blinding. I'm like, hey, do you have it? Like, yeah. And like, I'm walking around the next day, and I've got a line of after image across my side, like that. Okay, that's not supposed to happen, but also, holy shit, okay, it really is the effect. It is of the order of magnitude. This is before there's a light trapping component, but if you calculate out how bright it should be without light trapping, it's like kilowatts or megawatts in like this very tiny area. It's like, okay, this is very interesting. And then I knew, and then I was all in, right? It was actually profoundly an emotional thing. What is answering the question for you? You're not trying to convince other investors. You're not trying to convince other people. You might be trying to convince your co-founders, but really you're trying to know and then move forward. You are your own most easiest person to fool, but you're also the most important person to convince. If you can hold those two things in tension, like pedals on a bicycle, then you can direct yourself to, okay, let's answer the critical questions with the minimum amount of money and the minimum amount of iterations, and then what's limiting you? It's usually the bravery to do the experiment. Because no one else will do it, which is the other reason it doesn't happen in government labs or university labs or anything. There's no secret, because it is dangerous. You have to think hard about everything that you're doing. Otherwise, you can easily burn yourself, much less like have an explosion or something, which has occasionally happened.
Yeah, when I code, I don't worry about an explotion. Like that's very real.
Not usually.
Not usually. That's a very real element to the iteration cycle here.
Yeah, no, it's true. So it's somehow you have to tune into yourself to the point where you're like, okay, this is time to do it. This is safe enough to push forward, and we can continue. I have a huge amount of respect for the experimental physicists and mechanical engineers, who've done this kind of work in the past, and people working on much larger energetic systems like rockets. This is very similar to a rocket, or bombs. Micronuclear reactors are quite similar. Okay, so like all these things, these are like the aspirational targets of like what you eventually build up all of the confidence in systems to be able to safely design, not bombs, micronuclear reactors, but and jets. But these things absolutely take time to like to square up to and then do and even then there were some reckless decisions that we do. I think they're basically some of the answer of why we made progress where others just didn't or wouldn't. And one big one is, isn't that too bright, Danielle? There must be a point that we are not far from where just the heat loading on my eyeballs is a concern, in addition to the brightness. But it's a little different from the sun. The sun itself is extremely bright, 6,000 degrees at the surface. The unit is 2 billion candelas per meter squared. It's this crazy unit. We never quite approach that. We'll be into the low millions, but we cover 100% of the sky instead of the sun, which is only 1/600,000th of the sky.
And I'd love to ask you, looking ahead, maybe at the next 2 years, what hot take do you have around the energy landscape? I know we talked a little bit about obviously like the war in Iran and geopolitical tensions. Are there any hot takes just being able to see maybe a bit farther than anyone who's not so deep in the technical
I think that the ways in which energy is in this way, even beyond, like it will definitely be a massive financial thing, but it will be more a physical and temporal constraint than anybody really understands from this point on for the entire, not just the rest of the decade. This is setting the tone for the entire century, right?
Wow.
Because previously it's like, we don't have the technology to switch off of fossil fuels. Okay, well, we have the technology, but it's either woke or Chinese. It's both. It's woke and Chinese. Worldwide, it's simply being available, much less available at like 1/2 or 1/3 the cost, will easily make that decision for people. And so the supply crisis is upon us. It can't be avoided. The technology, a foundational technology, which you can integrate, like we're an example of something that can integrate the fact that solar is practically free. Again, it's the cost of building material. In other words, you can make roofs, and we have done this. We have built little solar villages, A-frame villages, to be useful structures in addition to being inexpensive ways to mount solar, and the whole thing works. And so you're going to, like in China, you have whole mountainsides, otherwise unusable land, maybe it was arid. Not only is the solar helpful, but it helps hold the mountainsides down, and in the rain shadow, it condenses water for the plant life. So we're going to end up, so that's like a foundational thing. Another thing, a friend of mine, Casey Hanmer, shout out Terraform Industries, Lightcell sponsor. They have basically been like, look, people aren't solar pilled. What do you need? Well, you need synthetic fuels. Synthetic fuels that we can burn. From hydrogen to methane. And actually, my co-founder Steve's son went to MIT, now he's a professor. He works on synthetic propane, which is what we use for most experiments here. Hank Williams, there's nothing more American than propane and propane accessories. We're basically going to sell a barbecue that can power your Burning Man camp.
That's awesome.
And so that's sort of the next tier up from the thing that you can have in your purse. And then tier after that is a shipping container, 10 megawatts of power. Like basically, those backyard patio heaters with a big quartz tube, big flame.
I think they were very popular during COVID,
Very
especially in
popular.
New York City for restaurants.
Yeah. So it's a 20-pound propane, and then there's big quartz tube. That quartz tube, mass-produced, costs I think it's like $25. You can buy it on Amazon for like $40. It's so cheap. But one of those is order of magnitude the sort of thing we can get 100 kilowatts out of. So you multiply that by 100, you put it in a shipping container, make sure there's pretty good basically air movements to cool the solar cells, and you have an off-peak, solid state peaker plant, backup plant, something to power a data center that is cheaper and more efficient than a simple cycle gas turbine, and can be integrated into a combined cycle, basically as a topping cycle, to have much more energy efficiency, and can use any fuel, including hydrogen, at any mix. So therefore, you can just store the solar energy. So now now we're compounding in two different ways this foundational advance in the cost of solar cells. Directly, because we're generating power through solar cells, and we're generating power that's stored from the original fusion reactor, the sun in the sky. So that is going to be that plus batteries, solar plus batteries, everywhere. EVs, a huge kick in the pants everywhere. Chinese EVs, already it's going to be in Canada, Mexico, EU, okay? And they're more advanced than the Teslas right now, which maybe Elon can focus on that, okay? So basically, that's going to be on the energy side. And at the same time, if you look at most of the advances that are happening now, these came out of research, invention efforts, scientific efforts, things that got funded from the previous oil crisis, okay? Now, that's not gonna happen in the United States from the government, right? But it's gonna happen from people who have much deeper pockets with a much clearer need.
So like
Hyperscalers.
billionaire philanthropists?
Hyperscalers.
Okay.
Billionaire philanthropists who want to get on top of it and who have managed to negotiate themselves into the problem of having hundreds of megawatts of GPUs and nowhere to plug it in that isn't going to get sued, because the time frame for a grid interconnect is on the order of 3 to 7 years. And so what FERC has been pushing, the Federal Energy Resource Commission, Regulatory Commission, is like, okay, hyperscalers must bring their own power. They must bring their own capacity. So there's a demand that far outstrips all existing players for generators, gas turbines, and the electrical grid. So this is going to seed a golden age in energy technology. And maybe it won't be funded by the government here. Maybe it will. Maybe we're sufficiently not woke since we burn fossil fuels, drill baby drill. But it will be funded everywhere on the planet because they're in the same problem.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for walking us through all of this frontier science and future product needs and maybe what's coming up ahead. Are there any questions I didn't ask you that I should have?
What does this thing look like?
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
do you guys want to see it?
Yeah.
We're gonna go look.